حاملا معي المودة والصداقة.
Good afternoon on this Sunday, February 12th. I'm Nina Nofa. You're watching the English newscast, and these are today's top stories. North Lebanon residents rallying to demand reopening of the Clayat airport to supplement Beirut's Rafiq Hariri International. Kazakhstan's foreign ministry says that Syrian government officials and armed rebels are being invited to peace talks to be held February 15th and 16th, respectively, in the capital, Astana. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe dine in Gulf at Mar-a-Lago. Trump tweets, Japan is very well represented. North Lebanon residents are rallying to demand the reopening of the Clayat airport to supplement Beirut's Rafiq Hariri International. They were quoted saying, "We demand the reoperation of the Clayat airport." A demonstrator was heard saying during the rally held in the Tel Hayat area of Akkad. Earlier this week, a civil society campaign aimed at pressuring state authorities into reopening the North Lebanon airport was launched on social media under the title, "Clayat is flying." Many believe a renovated airport could strengthen the economic situation in North Lebanon. The Future movement has been actively lobbying to reopen the airport. Now used by the army to maintain its helicopters, a banner hanging at the entrance reads, "René Awad's Air Base, Clayat." Passenger flights operated from the airport for some time until Lebanese MPs returning from the Taif Accord in Saudi Arabia met there in 1989 and elected René Awad president on the spot. Foreign Minister Jabran Basir says that politicians have a decisive week ahead of them to agree on a new electoral law ahead of the deadlines. Lebanese parties, he said, are deeply divided over the characteristics of a new vote law that will govern the upcoming parliamentary elections set for May. Parliamentary elections are scheduled to be held in May, but officials are racing to decide on an electoral system before February 21st, when the constitutional time limit expires for a new law ahead of the polls. Elections were postponed twice so far, in 2013 and in 2014, over security concerns. Basir also says that the FPM is ready to discuss all forms of fair electoral laws. He kicked off his tour by meeting Mujbil's Bishop Michel Aoun. He was also welcomed by several lawmakers and the prominent figures from the area. Kazakhstan's foreign ministry says that Syrian government officials and armed rebels are being invited to peace talks to be held February 15 and 16 in its capital, Astana. It is planned to hold the latest high-level meeting within the Astana process on resolving the situation in Syria, the ministry said in a statement, adding that those invited include the Syrian government and representatives of the Syrian armed opposition, as well as UN envoy Staffan de Mistura. This comes as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkish troops and their Syrian rebel allies have entered the center of ISIS-held bastion al-Bab, saying its capture was just a matter of time. The Turkish army launched an ambitious campaign inside Syria on August 24, codenamed Euphrates Shield, to clean its border from ISIS fighters and stop the advance of Kurdish militia. But the clashes in al-Bab have proved the toughest in the campaign, with Turkish military fatalities surging. In world news, President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had dinner and golfed at Mar-a-Lago, the estate of the presidential billionaire. The two leaders were joined by their wives, Aiki Abe and Melania Trump. South African four-time majors champion Ernie Els also joined Trump and Abe for a round at Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida. Trump tweeted on Saturday evening saying he had a great time and Japan is well represented. Between tweets about his visit with the Japanese Prime Minister and golfing with Abe and Els, Trump sent out a tweet again castigating the media over their treatment of his daughter Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump and her husband were seen leaving Mar-a-Lago earlier in the evening for what appeared to be a black tie affair. German firefighters are evacuating hundreds of passengers at Hamburg airport after 50 people were injured by an unknown toxin that likely spread through the airport's air conditioning system. The German news agency DPA reported that 50 people complained about breathing problems and burning eyes earlier this morning, and firefighters started examining them to find out whether they had to be taken to the hospital. Those who were evacuated from the Hamburg airport had to wait outside the terminals in sub-zero temperatures. The airport could not immediately be reached for comment. It is not clear how the evacuation affected air traffic at the place. North Korea staged its first ballistic missile test since Donald Trump took office, a move denounced by Japan's leader who won 100% backing from the new U.S. president. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, whose country would be in range of a hostile North, called the launch absolutely intolerable. South Korea said Pyongyang was testing Trump. The missile was launched around 7:55 a.m. GMT from Bangyeon Air Base in the western province of North Pyongyang and flew east towards the Sea of Japan. It flew about 500 kilometers before falling into the sea, according to the ministry, adding the exact type of missile had yet to be identified. The U.S. Strategic Command said it detected and tracked what is assessed to be a medium-range ballistic missile. Coming up next, we have the pleasure to welcome Lina Ksaifi, the co-founder of the recently established Equip. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We have the pleasure today to introduce you to Lina Ksaifi. She is the co-founder of the recently established NGO, the George Ksaifi Organization, that aims to build coexistence and tolerance in Lebanon. She was awarded the British Chevening, am I saying it right? Chevening Scholarship to do her master's at SOAS University in London, where she wrote her thesis on abuse of migrant domestic workers in Lebanon. It was at this point that she decided to come back to the country and dedicate her life to improving the employment relationship between employers and domestic workers. She has worked with the United Nations, specifically the International Labor Organization, and with the International Anti-Slavery Organization, Walk Free, and is now the founder and director of the social enterprise Equip, a center for employers of domestic workers to help build professional and positive employment relationship. Welcome, Lina. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Yumna.
I mean, this is, we're doing this for International Women's Day. I think a lot of people are getting to know a little bit more about March 8 being an International Women's Day, although it's a political party here. Yeah. But we're not going to talk about that. Starting this NGO and coming back to Lebanon, why? When everybody says leave, why are you here?
That's a heavy question. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. I think a big part of it was that I lived abroad most of my life. So every time when I lived in Canada, for example, I always wanted to come back and be in Lebanon. My dad made it a point for me to go and do my studies abroad because in Lebanon you need a car, you need your expenses, you need your phone. So he's like, go be a student, a real student, and work and study at the same time. So living abroad, I always wanted to come back to Lebanon. And now that I'm back in Lebanon, it's a challenge. We all know that. I mean, we're not kidding anybody, but I've also learned to be resilient, like every other Lebanese national. There is a place to make a name for yourself here. Abroad, it's saturated. There's so much going on. Here, there's still so much that we need to build and do together. So there's room to be heard.
True. And you took on quite a controversial subject, which is the subject of migrant workers, because as you know, Lebanon has had a history of migrant worker controversial problems. A few years ago, Human Rights Watch was also talking about how some countries were banned, some nationals from countries were banned from coming into Lebanon. And you decided, no, let's do this. Exactly. Let's try to improve the employer-employee relationship with migrant workers. So tell us a bit about that.
Spot on. It is a very controversial topic, but thing is, I see it differently. My whole point is that it shouldn't be so controversial. We shouldn't be seeing abuse, especially since decades now we've been employing migrant domestic workers in our households to be around our loved ones, our children. Exactly, our children or the elderly. So in my opinion, it should be something that we know how to do and do it professionally. So it shouldn't be controversial.
So what does Equip offer? Okay. Well, first it equips you with the knowledge.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So equip yourself so what Equip does is that it addresses a gap in society. And the gap is that here we are employing over 250,000 domestic workers in Lebanon, but nobody's really telling us how we should employ them. What is an employment relationship? legally speaking, they're excluded from the labor law. When we go to recruitment agencies, people usually skip over the contract, and the contract stipulates how we should treat one another. So the gap is that we don't know how to treat migrant domestic workers. So EQIP comes in and says, listen, there are success stories. We know many people that have had great employment relationships where they've lasted for 20 years and they've really become members of the family. Yeah.
Right.
So what EQIP wants to do is equip employers with the guidance and the tools and ethical advice to ensure that they too get a professional and long-term employment relationship.
Okay, so walk me through it here, because I know we were talking about this earlier. There are certain requirements for migrant workers that a lot of Lebanese nationals don't adhere to, like the 1 day off requirement.
Yeah.
Domestic workers should be allowed by law to have 1 day off, entitled to 1 day off.
Every week, yeah.
And a lot of them don't get that.
Yeah.
And so EQIP will say, no, this is important. But you were saying there's a fear. They don't want to give them a day off, not because necessarily, they're just cruel, but there are fears there. So tell me a little bit about that.
Also, it goes back to the idea of who's been guiding employers on how to employ a domestic worker in the right way. Nobody has. What we're very good at is saying, you've abused your domestic worker, but what EQIP wants to do is say it's her legal right to have her day off weekly, to be able to get out of the house and separate her work life from her personal life. First of all, a rejuvenated worker is going to be a happier worker, which means a happier employee living in your household is going to be
The most important thing, I think, when migrant workers are concerned is to build trust. Between the employee and the employer.
Right.
Because if you trust them with your home and your family, then you can also trust them with leaving the home, going for a vacation and coming back. How can EQIP help build that trust?
So trust is essential for any employment relationship or any relationship, especially so when you're inviting somebody you don't know, whose culture and language is different than yours, into the privacy of your own home. So to build trust, it comes with time, but it also comes with a certain frame set of how you're viewing that relationship. If from the beginning you're going to think that she's going to run away, she's going to steal, she's going to not want to be productive, then that's not going to be a good employment relationship. So how we view this person, first of all, she's an employee. So we have to give her her rights as an employee, like any one of us that are employees at an NGO or at FutureTV station. We need to give her her rights. So that's where trust begins. When I give you your rights, and when you're responsible and productive as a worker, there is going to be trust.
And EQIP helps mediate between the employer and the employee. There are also outing days.
Right, so this goes back to the day off. So the idea of the day off is many employers are scared to give a day off because of either previous experiences, or an agency might tell them don't give her a day off, especially at the beginning, or she might have come from a household where her mom didn't give her a day off. So the idea is, here we are saying it's her right to have a day off, and this is how you can give her a day off, through our organized outing service, which is a fun and secure outing for domestic workers. For example, just last week we did a yoga event where we had 13 participants join, where employers sent domestic workers to the yoga event, where maybe before that they wouldn't have given her a day off because they would be scared that she might run away, or the domestic worker herself might be too scared about leaving the household, especially if she's new. She doesn't have friends here, she doesn't know the culture very well, even the language barriers.
So what it would do is actually kind of ease this whole relationship and facilitate it by providing knowledge, providing information, helping build trust. Was it, this is something I've always wondered, because Lebanon has many gaps that need to be filled, and there are so many NGOs, whether it's working on refugee, on the refugee crisis, on women issues, on the migrant workers, the garbage crisis. How hard is it to start your own NGO? Because you could have said that's it. There are times where you go, I can't do this anymore. How am I going to get through the day?
Yeah, and that was me like about 3 months ago, right before we launched. It's difficult. We're in a society where the legal structure is lacking, and where they do exist, there is no monitoring or implementation. It was very difficult. It wasn't easy. There were many obstacles, but when you really believe in something, when you're passionate about something, you strive to move forward.
And I think the British Embassy saw that, which is why they still fund the NGO.
Yeah. They're my only funders. Since the beginning, since they gave me the Chevening Scholarship, and I came back to them, I was like, I have this great idea, I want to do it, They've been supporting me through the pilot project, which took place in 2015, until today, where we're actually running and operating a center where employers call us and they're looking for our advice and they want to enroll the domestic worker in our services.
And it makes you think, for the British Embassy to support such a project, because I assume you presented the project beforehand, is probably because they feel, okay, this is something that needs to be worked on in this country.
Yeah, I mean, as the embassy, they always have money aside for their human rights portfolio, and they really invest in their priorities. And one of their priorities is human rights and advancing women's rights, and specifically migrant workers' rights. So that's where domestic workers and EQUIP falls under.
Okay, do you feel like, you know, now that you just launched, and it's always, first it's the launch and then it's about maintaining it, and what is the hope when you go, as you go forward?
My hope is, first of all, for everybody to know about EQUIP, which is why it's so important that you invited me here today, because we're still young, we're passionate, we're young, but we need the word to get out there. We need people to know that this is it. This is the new way of employing domestic workers. What our mothers did and what our grandmothers did, or whatever, the generation before, it's not working anymore. So we need to change the way. So my hope is that everybody
change or maybe update it as well.
Update it, improve it. You know, let's have a good employment relationship. So this is my hope, that everybody will trust in EQUIP. Not everybody initially is going to come running to EQUIP.
Right, because a lot of people are going to say, well, why do we need EQUIP? We've been dealing with migrant workers for years, and we know how to do it.
And if they're doing it right and the worker is staying and they're satisfied, great, my work is done there. But if they're employing the first domestic worker and she leaves, and the second domestic worker turns out to be a failed relationship, and the third and the fourth,
then there's a pattern.
There's a need. There's a pattern and there's a need, and this is where EQUIP will come in. And it takes time. What we're doing is we're educating people, which takes time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us. That was Lina Ksaifi, the co-founder of the recently established EQUIP. To know more about it, you can check their Facebook page. And, well, we'll be sharing this video for a while. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Yumna.
And this marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. North Lebanon residents rally to demand the reopening of the Layat airport to supplement Beirut's Rafiq Hariri International. Kazakhstan's foreign ministry says Syrian government officials and armed rebels are being invited to peace talks next week in their capital of Astana. President Donald Trump, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo dine and golf at Mar-a-Lago. Trump tweets, Japan is very well represented. Those are your Sunday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofat. Thank you to all of you for watching, and tune in tomorrow for all the latest. Take care.
المودة والصداقة